Well, we're going to kind of shift gears here, but I think this is a great talk, and I'm sure you will learn a lot, as will I. Mary Ruff is an occupational therapist who works in the Department of Ophthalmology at the university and throughout the Twin Cities, actually doing low vision therapy. And I know she's given talks to blepharospasm audiences in the past, and people have really found her suggestions helpful. She's been incredibly helpful to me, taking care of patients both with low vision from things like tumors and for other reasons, but she really has a lot to offer patients, I think, separate from what we can offer medically and surgically, so it's really exciting to have her here. So I'd like to welcome Mary up to give a talk on blepharospasm and low vision therapy.
All right, well, good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Harrison, for inviting me here today, and certainly to the Research Foundation for sponsoring this event. So as Dr. Harrison mentioned, I'm going to be talking about blepharospasm and low vision therapy. We're going to look at what kinds of challenges, really the day-to-day, everyday challenges of living with blepharospasm. What are some interventions? What are some strategies that might be helpful? And then what is some of the supporting evidence around that? So maybe just a show of hands, how many people are familiar in any way with low vision therapy or visual rehabilitation? We've got one, we've got two. All right, so I'm assuming none of you have been referred for those kinds of services otherwise. So I'll let you know what that you might want to consider going forward with that. So first we'll just look at kind of what is low vision rehabilitation. You know, I work with people with all kinds of visual impairments, whether it would be blepharospasm, macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy. But what low vision therapy is looking at is how does that impact daily life? What does it make hard to do? And what are ways you can approach that? What are ways you can make life easier day to day in the setting of having some vision loss? At the university, we function as a team. We have a low vision optometrist who looks at maximizing glasses and optometric kinds of solutions for people. Myself, I'm an occupational therapist, so I do the teaching and the training on the various methods. And then, of course, we have our referring physicians, such as Dr. Harrison or McClelland, who we've heard from earlier, who refer patients in. So that's really sort of the team we have at the University of Minnesota. So I have been in this field for about 20 years. Some would say that's probably too long, but it's been a really rewarding field to be in. And having been around for a while, I've certainly been able to see sort of what's changed. And this today was a lot of exciting change as far as medical treatments go and all the kind of medical interventions that are possible. In the area of low vision therapy, what has really changed are the opportunities with technology. Technologies that used to cost people thousands of dollars, in many ways they now carry around in the form of their smartphone. So we'll kind of talk about how to navigate that. What hasn't changed really are the needs that people walk in the door with when they come to participate in visual rehab. And usually the first need is to understand what in the world is going on with their vision, and to make sense out of experiences that otherwise they can't make sense out of, and for their families to understand. That's usually the number one, that's where we begin. You know, different eye diseases, different conditions just cause different kinds of experiences, and they can be very hard to sort out. They can be very confusing. So just sort of that initial education piece is usually the starting place. Then other goals that quickly follow are people want to be able to do their everyday tasks. They want to be able to read, to cook, to make meals, to do their job, to drive, to walk safely, maybe to continue with whatever their vocational track is. So vision rehab is a very individualized process. We sit down with an individual, find out what their goals are, what's getting in the way, and try to find solutions. So I think with blepharospasm, of course, it's kind of a unique space to be in. because you really have to be able to navigate two worlds, sort of the sighted world, and when things aren't going so well, the non-sighted world, and sort of be able to toggle back and forth between those two ways of being. So that's a unique challenge. And I think what we would want to draw on in vision rehab is kind of helping with some tools. What do people do who can't see? How do they manage their homemaking? How do they safely shower? How do they walk down the street independently? How do they use their technology? So the visual rehab process would be looking at what are those tools that you can use when you need them, and certainly put aside when you don't. So what are the functional challenges of blepharospasm? Well, certainly we want to look at how can you minimize eye spasms, and some of that has already been addressed, but we'll look at that a little bit further. Managing the triggers like light and having the photophobia and the sensitivity to light. We want to talk through what are the challenges of functional blindness. What can you do, again, if you're in the middle of something and now you're not able to see. And then all of those things, not infrequently, can add up to the emotional kinds of challenges. And blepharospasm shares along with other eye conditions in having a very high incidence of depression. So that's not something we want to skip over. So those are what we'll try to touch on here. And you're going to have to watch my time for me. Okay. All right, so alleviating maneuvers. This was alluded to earlier. Dr. McClellan mentioned this, as did others, that some people find it very helpful to use different kinds of tactile touch or different gestures to minimize their symptoms. So I looked at the research around this, and a study was done in 2013, and they named different things that people reported being effective. Touching the eyelids, coughing, humming, chewing gum. I sat with someone today who said they can sing in the car and they can drive better. You know, adjusting glasses, rubbing eyelids, lots of different things. So what did the research show was the outcome of that? And it was rather impressive. 45% of the people studied, 45% reported a moderate benefit, and 18% said it really stopped their symptoms. So for a non-invasive, simple intervention, that's certainly something to try if you haven't. If you've been doing it and wondering, you know, gee, am I the only one in the world that does these things? Well, this is validation. No, you're not. This can be effective, and I guess it's a big why not, right, to give that a try. They also looked at this, got a twitchy finger. They also looked at this with hemifacial spasm. So again, how effective is it with that condition? And again, about 50% had a moderate to a complete benefit was reported in this 2013 study. So again, a simple thing to try. If it works, well, good. You have one more tool. And then there's managing the sensitivity to light. And I see Exxon Optics has their FL41 glasses here today. FL41 refers to a certain color and a certain formulation of tint. And this has been studied compared to other tints that might look the same, just plain plum glasses, or compared to gray tinted glasses. And the FL41 is consistently giving a superior outcome. So it's helped with reading, with decreasing the frequency and the severity of blepharospasm, with managing overlight sensitivity and fluorescent lighting. So if that's something you haven't tried, again, a nice, non-invasive, inexpensive attempt to help with that photophobia. How many people here use those? Yeah, quite a number. Yeah. So, and here are, this is just referring to the study where they did compare it to kind of mimicking colors, and the other colors did not do as well. So there's some resources for you. There's a couple of places where you can get those, and again, one of them they're present here today. Okay? All right, so how about just getting through your activities of daily living? You know, maybe you're on the computer and now, well, you know, you have an eye spasm, you have to stop. You're about to send a text message, do a text message, and now you have to stop. You know, you're reading, you're cooking, you're showering, you're walking, and now you're kind of stranded because it gets interrupted. So what do people do who can't see to manage these different activities? You know, one of the first tools to come out in my office across the board, across all eye diagnoses, is their smartphones. So how many here have a smartphone? Okay, so a good majority of people with smartphones. You know, smartphones hold technology that, again, in the world of vision rehab, people used to have to spend thousands of dollars to get the functionality that's hidden in there. And 9 out of 10 folks who come to see me don't really know what's possible with their cell phone. And it's either an Android phone or an iPhone. They both work. But some great built-ins with that are you can, for a visual comfort, you can reverse the contrast on the phone. You can get a black background with white letters. It's not so glary. That's helpful. You can use tools like Siri. How many are Siri users on their iPhone? Okay, some. And the Android has a comparable operating system, OK Google. And so if you're wanting to send a text and now your eyes aren't cooperating, you're simply going to tell your phone, OK Google, you know, text my mom. And you're going to dictate that text and off it's going to go. So you're not going to rely on your vision for that. Or you can ask your phone to read your text message or your emails. So there's lots of information that can just be done by voice. Again, it's all there. These aren't special apps or anything special in the phone, but you do kind of have to know how to operate it. I think blepharospasm hits people of a certain age in general. That age would be about my age. And we're not always comfortable. I can make it sound easy, do this, do that. It takes training, you know, and I'll spend a couple of sessions with people to get comfortable with using those functions. So you need to find a resource. If that doesn't sound so simple, find someone who can help. And that could be a vision rehab specialist. That could be a 5-year-old nephew, possibly, although they go way too fast. So often if you find someone who really knows where to start at the beginning, that helps. Computers, again, same functionality available in your computers. You can dictate to your computer. You can have your computer read everything aloud to you. So you don't have to feel stranded. If you're in the middle of a task and you're not now able to see it, you can always toggle back and forth between these functions. There is a really cool new app that's available right now just with the iPhone and the iPad. And that is called Seeing AI, AI standing for Artificial Intelligence. Seeing AI is an app that allows you to, let's say you're in a restaurant and you want to take a picture of the menu and it reads it to you right out of the gate. Very easy to use. Seeing AI can kind of narrate a scene around you. It can tell you about the expression of a person sitting across from you. It's very new. It came out this summer. And in fact, my iPad was too dated, so I have another one on order because I haven't had the chance to actually use this yet. But it's getting fabulous reviews from people with vision loss. And again, just kind of opens the door to those things that when you're not seeing well, here's an option. And of course, other technology, Alexa, you've probably heard, seen commercials, or Google Home, little device that sits on your counter. And again, you operate it all by voice commands. So you don't need to have vision to do that. Alexa, play my music. Alexa, create my grocery list. Alexa, read my grocery list. It can do those things. These aren't hard to operate. It might sound that way, but they're really quite simple to use once you have the opportunity to learn. And finally, things like audiobooks. Anyone with a visual impairment qualifies to get the book reading service from the National Congress library for the blind. That's a free service, and that's something that would be available to everybody. So if reading has become stressful, the pleasure's gone, it's too much work, that's a free service. Things you might try in the home, of course, lighting being a big issue, sort of what's the answer? We need light to see. And what I find most people most comfortable with is using just dimmer ambient light, maybe a couple torchère lamps in the corner so it really projects the light up and out but not at you. And then having a good gooseneck lamp over what you're doing that's not shining in your eyes. So light kind of gets to be paradoxical with these situations. You just have to find kind of the right method that works for you. What about getting through those everyday activities? Again, you're in the middle of something. You're just about to put dinner in the oven, and now you're not seeing well. Well, that can sound kind of scary. Or you're in the shower, and now you're not seeing, and now you have to decide what's the shampoo and what's the conditioner. There are lots and lots of ways people manage those things who are blind. And I'm sure you're all familiar with blind people who are completely independent, so there are ways to do that. I can't list them all here, but a really nice resource is in your handout, and it's this website, visionaware.org. They have a little drop-down menu. It clicks through everyday activities and says, these are ways people do it. Kind of experiment with that. Your local state services for the blind. I was talking at the table at lunch today about how people felt about the idea of if they're walking and all of a sudden they're feeling a bit stranded, what would it be like to use something like a white cane? That's always a big hurdle for people. But I think as I work with people in vision rehab, having that opportunity is being less isolated. It's saying if I get stranded out there with an eye spasm, I have plan B. And I know how to use it, and I therefore can widen my world. So that would be something to consider as well. As I looked for information on blepharospasm and visual rehab, I would say 90% of the information I found was about blepharospasm and depression. Depression being sort of the number one non-motor challenge for people. They did a study that compared the incidence, they compared the quality of life impact on people with conditions such as macular degeneration or, again, diabetic retinopathy, thing that cause permanent vision loss. And they compared that to what's the quality of life impact of blepharospasm. And they found it was the same, okay? That's pretty significant. Another study looked at the incidence of depression and blepharospasm and found 37% of people reported depression. That's a high number. So it's not something we get to overlook. Why does that happen? You think anytime we have a loss in our life, it's pretty well understood that we go through a cycle of grieving. Okay, and we might do this in a little different order, but this is a pretty human response to responding to a loss. And loss might be loss of a job, it might be loss of health, it might be loss of a loved one. If you're in Houston, it might be loss of a home. Just loss in general kind of carries us through these 5 stages of grief. And I'll just touch briefly on them. So the first one, we're walking along, our life is normal, and then bang, we get a diagnosis. Or bang, we lose our job. First, there's that sense of shock and denial. Like, this can't be happening. Who can I blame? This isn't right. Then we start to kind of move into anger. Like, okay, dang it. This is happening and I'm really not happy about it. I'm really frustrated. And anger can also kind of look like embarrassment and shame. We can feel like I should be able to overcome this. I should be in control of this. Why does this have control of me? And that can get kind of into a shame cycle. And from there, we can start to feel helpless. Like, I got nowhere to turn. I'm feeling helpless and alone in it. And if we can move through that, we start reaching out. I think this conference is just an excellent example of reaching out. You're here, you're telling your stories, you're sharing information. That's what gets us through those things. That's what really leads to acceptance and to return to meaningful life. So depression is when we can't get through it. We get stuck. That helplessness kind of overtakes us. We just can't really move on beyond that or envision a meaningful future. So if someone really has clinical depression, that merits a clinical intervention. That becomes a physical illness in and of itself, and really the studies would say the best outcome here is going to be a combination maybe of medication and some counseling to get past that. And then you want to look at, as I said in that cycle, some depression is normal, right? That's part of grieving. We get there, and hopefully we get past it. So how do we get past it? Also just looking for emotional support. Again, what an excellent example right here. You're doing it. We try to turn to families and friends, but that doesn't always work because we don't always feel understood by family and friends. So there can sort of feel like there's a barrier there. I think when we're trying to talk to people about what we're going through, and we have a rare condition, you're correct in thinking, no one's walked in my shoes, no one knows what this feels like. But really the shared experience is everybody's been through loss, whether it's a health crisis, a death, some failure in their life. Everybody's been through loss, and that's the universal experience. And that's kind of where we can share. So some good coping mechanisms there. You find who you are. What works for you? Is it humor, meditation, faith and prayer, support groups, exercise? Or on a good day, maybe it's all of the above, Do I have time for a very short story? Sure. Okay. Just a personal anecdote. So my health crisis came in the form of breast cancer twice. And the first time I was just 40. You're not supposed to get breast cancer when you're 40. My kids were school-age kids. So it was very disruptive, very, very scary. But strangely, I have one really sweet memory from that time. And that was seeing my third grader off to school. And inevitably, I'd be on the couch, looking terrible, feeling terrible, bald with my hat on because it's Minnesota and it's cold, and he'd be getting ready to walk out the door. And we had a routine. And our routine was he would look up and say, "Well, goodbye, big bald mama." And then my response, my scripted response, was, "Goodbye, little hairy sonny," and off he would go. And a silly story, ridiculous in a way, but it got me through the day. And I think looking at the thing that could be embarrassing, a bald mom, being the bald mom, to name it, to kind of have some humor about it, it empowered him, it empowered me. So at my house, humor's kind of a deal, whether that seemed funny or not, but you find what works for you. Okay, quick anecdote, just a quick little reference to a study on blepharospasm and Botox, because this just caught my eye. It's a recent study, and they were looking at what's the effect of Botox, of what we would call the frown muscles, on depression. And what they found was people who had Botox that included the frown muscles, the incidence of depression went down. And the hypothesis was that we have kind of a facial feedback loop. We feel bad, we frown, we say, "Oh, I feel bad." And then we feel bad, and then we frown, and it can kind of go round and round. And that our body is very aware of all of that going on and responding to it all the time. So again, the hypothesis was that if we can't frown, we kind of break that cycle. It was published in 2017. It's not a large study, but I just thought that was worth mentioning. So, just in review, managing the challenges of blepharospasm. So, we talked about the alleviating maneuvers just kind of the things you can do, the touch, the cough, the whatever might minimize your symptoms. The use of FL41 tint, that special tint for managing photophobia. Look around the house and think, what are my triggers in the house? Where is light bothering me? How can I change it? Learning to use technology. Technology is really your friend right now. And again, lots of us are carrying that around in our pocket and we don't know the power of what we have there. Learn the non-visual tools. I just encourage you to go to that website. It's just interesting to see how people manage daily life. And then just be sure you're finding the emotional support that you need. Okay? Thank you.